Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're starting the year-end list, starting off with the most popular, inevitably, the top 10 worst hit songs of 2020. So this is probably going to wind up a different sort of list in comparison with my list of the worst hit songs of previous respective years. Namely because in 2020, I'm not really all that angry at the worst music that this year has to offer. Or rather that anger isn't my primary emotion that I experienced listening through a lot of these. Maybe it came from less exposure. When I was in lockdown, I was listening to hundreds of other albums that were just not in the charts. So maybe the overplay didn't screw me over, but I gotta be honest, that's generally true whenever I've made these lists, and I've still normally found plenty of stuff to piss me off. Or maybe it's because the pop charts felt better overall. It seems like the general consensus is that 2020 has been a pretty damn good year for the Hot 100, if nothing else, with the best showing that pop and country have had in years, along with some pretty terrific R&B. And hell, if you were able to find pockets in rap and trap and reggaeton, you can find stuff you can really like. Even the plethora of posthumous releases felt like they were being handled with more care and focus and didn't quite feel like so much of money-grubbing disasters as they have in the past. And even though we are still firmly back in the era of album bombs and insane chart turnover, and let's not forget TikTok, maybe it's because everyone in every genre was doing it, the impact wound up kind of manageable and not so disastrous for certain subgenres like in 2018. Or maybe it's because there weren't the huge crushing disappointments from acts that I otherwise really like, as there was a bunch of megastars that just sat out 2020 altogether, leaving a lot of the new kids to chart the path going forward. Or hell, maybe it's those new kids themselves. It was starting off last year, but now there is an era of pop that's embracing a brand of ironic detachment that's at least targeted at Gen Z, if not being outright made by that generation. And while it doesn't always click emotionally for me, it can swing both ways, and the bad often doesn't become atrocious because some of that emotional distance is actually built in. Now, I also get the feeling that at least some parts of this year are an anomaly that's linked to 2020 alone. When you deal with such world-shaping events that are damn near unprecedented in the modern age, or at least our understanding of it, it's hard to think of any moment that's constructed here in this year that will have greater staying power outside of 2020's context. And that likely means that any bad trends are likely going to fade out just as fast as people want to get away from the year, potentially taking their artists along with them. Ergo, my main emotion going through a lot of the worst songs here, it's not anger, but more revulsion and disgust. A lot less offended or disappointed, more just kind of repulsed and thinking that thank God most of this will not persist beyond this weird microcosm of a year. I would put money on maybe a third to half of this list not being a thing in 2021. And again, maybe that's another net positive going forward. I could be looking forward to that. But alright, the rules. The songs had to debut on the 2020 year-end Hot 100 list, and even though there are other songs that might flit outside of that boundary, and the whole year of qualifier is growing shakier with every single Billboard year, they should fix that at some point. We might as well start with our dishonorable mentions. Well, okay, I said there weren't any huge crushing disappointments, but that doesn't mean there aren't some smaller ones. Like this duet and the whole canon of, look, I'm glad your relationship seems to be finally working out, but I really don't need to hear music from you two about it. Basically, it's a duet that plays the weaknesses of both artists, and nobody's told them that. With none of Gwen Stefani's vamping or flair, and none of Blake Shelton's firepower or emotionally evocative delivery or lyrics. In other words, it feels like a collab that's purpose-built because of the voice and nothing else. Which is kind of ironic because it seems like both artists seem to have lost their voices along the way. Amidst a cloud of fizzy drum machines, whooshing effects, and such a glaring lack of vocal chemistry, the hook has to rely on a pile of double negatives to make any sort of sense. If anything, this reminds me a lot of the slew of duets that were rushed out of Nashville in 2011 to capitalize on what the band formerly called Lady Antebellum delivered, but let's be real, this is no Remind Me or even Don't You Wanna Stay. This is Blake Shelton regressing to that era, making the most tepid music of his career. I might have predicted that God's Country was a fluke for him, but ugh, not like this.
What? I thought a bro nigga said something. Talking shit, but they still ain't saying nothing. We gon' trap this bitch out till the feds come. Run it up, huh? What she say? I thought a pussy hoe said something. How I go when I'm talking, you listen. Cut her off cause she spoke on the business.
Look, I know I'm in the minority that doesn't like this song, mostly because Moneybagg Yo is such a thoroughly unlikable presence in the aftermath of things going awry with Megan Thee Stallion, that him making a presumptive cut about all the money he's stacking, it feels a little bit like he's gloating before he's actually won anything. And yes, I know he got a big remix with DaBaby and City Girls, which is actually a fair bit better, but in the era of deluxe reissues and chart-boosting remixes, aka 2020, for a rule for this list, I'm gonna go with what's credited on the year-end Billboard list. It's why the remix of Suicidal by YNW Melly with the late Juice WRLD is missing this list because the original is bad. And yes, Moneybagg Yo can ride your basic Migos flow and sterile trap percussion, but his rhymes are not all that good, especially on the clunky second verse, and it's the content from this guy that really turned me off. How after he stole a girl from one of his friends, he gave her back to the streets for a full refund because his warranty was good, especially given that he then emphasized that she's salty because you scarred her, and that you just want head. You don't even want to know what her pussy's like. Why bring that up? Tack on the expected COVID reference to thoroughly date this song, and we just have another thoroughly unlikable trap song from an artist who will be forgotten by next year. My dishonorable mentions are always clogged with these guys. Let's move on.
He likes a good time. He comes alive at midnight. My mama doesn't trust him.
Now, in contrast, this is a song that you will absolutely remember, mostly because where it fails is actually kind of amusing, and I can see how this might have some ironic appeal. I've been saying for years now that Camila Cabello was the least talented singer of Fifth Harmony, but I will acknowledge she's built up a pop presence for herself, especially by leaning into what she thinks are more Latin elements. And I gotta believe with the increased success of reggaeton, that had to play into this song's run, but not for the first time. Camila Cabello reminds me a lot of Jennifer Lopez's early 2000s pop run in playing to a sanitized image that she cannot credibly back up. I guess that makes DaBaby her Ja Rule and Shawn Mendes her Ben Affleck and Wonder the Jiggly, and wow, that came together way too fast. Well, look, the problem with this song is that it really can't get all that hot and heavy or emphasize any sort of chemistry. DaBaby might be proving that he can do the interchangeable pop ludicrous guest features surprisingly well, but that also shows there's no real stakes to this, because Camila Cabello is shrieking that she's always been the good girl and now doesn't want to be. It doesn't come across as sensual, but like a preteen who's screaming at her parents to let her go out because she just got a black leather jacket and she thinks that makes her super edgy. And you know what, fair enough, I also had a lot of that attitude into my 20s, which is probably I feel a little bit more embarrassed for this than actually hating it. But when you pair it with a lot of gutless writing, way too much reverb, a cheap hand clap, and melodrama that nobody could sell credibly, yeah, let's be real, this ain't good.
Roxanne, all she wanna do is party all night. Goddamn, Roxanne, never gonna love me, but it's alright.
Hey look, it's the Drake / Post Malone ripoff simp anthem that apparently the world wanted. Yes, this is another one of those cases where everyone else tolerated this a lot more than I did, mostly because it seemed like in 2020, all the male pop stars wanted to do was complain about rich LA girls on Instagram and how shallow they are because they spent daddy's money on Whole Foods and cocaine, seemingly blissfully unaware of their own shallowness by chasing only them, to say nothing of the hypocrisy. And look, I have met women and men in Toronto who can be just like this, and it is exhausting and expensive to try and be around them. And that bleary-eyed frustration, it's the emotion a song like this it's trying to go for. The problem is that I need to care about Arizona's Zervas, and he is the definition of a one-hit wonder. Somebody writing way better production and a good hook rather than sustainable or unique personality, as he's got nothing moving or charting beyond this. Yeah, bad timing with the lockdown, sure, but there's just not much here beyond and outside the obvious car wreck sound effect integrated into the rickety, cheap as hell sounding production. I don't think this guy was built for anything beyond the meme, as is pretty typical coming out of TikTok. Let's be real, Columbia got their quick paycheck, they moved on, and let's do it ourselves.
Yeah, you got that yummy, that yummy,
a whole lot of you thought this would be way higher, didn't you? It's pretty much the same for a lot of other people's lists. But look, I want to keep this short because I got a lot more to say about Bieber as this progresses, and pretty much everyone's already torn this to shreds, but here we go. The song feels gross because of the title word, the sort of awkward trap R&B pop sex song that tries to conflate food and sex and just winds up disgusting. But the strange thing is that with a better performer and maybe getting rid of that central word, there was potential. This could have worked. The bones of a tolerable song are here, and you know what, even if you called it yummy and had a credible R&B singer make it, maybe it's possible? The problem is that Justin Bieber has nothing close to that emotional range and writes and performs sex songs like he needs sex explained to him. I'll say this, if there's one thing Bieber sold well in this song, it's how unreasonably rich he is, that the only reason he's this detached from even good bad taste. And you know, while we're on that subject,
Bitches calling my phone like I'm locked up non-stop. From the plane to the fucking helicopter, yeah. Cops pulling up like I'm giving drugs, nah. I'm a pop star, not a doctor.
Okay, so we're reaching the point where lists of the worst hits of any respective year are starting to saturate more of the internet and YouTube. And while I try not to watch that many of them because I want to fully build my own case, I do keep an eye on what shows up, just so I might get an idea where the consensus might be falling. There are two songs on my list that I'm not sure have shown up very often, and maybe it's just because folks thought they were just too bland to dislike, but maybe it's because I have a history with both acts, which intensifies some of my feelings, and in this case, I mean, he was sitting out the majority of this year. Drake did not have to do this. At this point, Drake should just stop working with DJ Khaled. I've been saying it for years now. Whenever he does so, and it charts, it's bad. Yes, even more so than 2C Slide, which falls in the category of Drake dance tracks that are thoroughly stupid, questionably produced, and mediocre, but you can't hate them that much. You know, like One Dance and Hotline Bling. No. This is bad in a mostly unique way, with Drake remaking Non-Stop with an even more formless melody and trap instrumental, with less curdled anger and more just lifeless flexing with a really bad Young Thug impression with added patois, because of course he's still doing that. In the grand DJ Khaled tradition, it is a song that's resting so heavily on its laurels that it doesn't even attempt to really try. There's one somewhat decent line referencing David Foster in his production credits on the second verse, but that's also where he effectively gives up mid-verse, even with his bad POPSTAR references and increasingly basic desires, all paired with a video where for some ungodly reason, he wanted to anchor it to the inexplicable and quite quickly fading appeal of Justin Bieber. And am I the only one who thinks that wanting a quick, easy death is in kind of bad taste in 2020? Even for Drake, in context? Because if Certified Lover Boy flops as badly as it seems primed to next year, I'm sure Pusha T knows someone who can make that happen. That's all I'm saying.
My last made me feel like I would never try again, but when I saw you, I felt something I never felt. Come closer, I'll give you all my love. If you treat me right, baby, I'll give you everything.
Okay, Trevor Daniel, we already have Kid Laroi to badly rip off Juice WRLD. We don't need you two here as well, especially given that you apparently threw this together in an hour and it shows. There is something to be said about doing the basics this wrong, and while I can see this clicking for a brief snapshot on the hook on TikTok in a quasi-Juice WRLD Post Malone sort of way, outside of that, it barely exists. It's trying to capture the dread in your gut where after a bad relationship you want to try again, but it doesn't have the sort of self-awareness to realize that this sort of drippy, oversold presentation probably sets you up for the same sort of failure and you have another disaster in the making. But really, for as much as I complain about bad pitch shifting and vocal layering, this might be one of the worst in the recent memory, especially on the bridge where the chipmunk vocals overlap with his in a really ugly way. And while it is indeed an ugly song, there's not enough in the performance or writing to elevate it. No matter how awkwardly theatrical Trevor Daniel says, "Come closer!" You know what? It's exactly the sort of song destined to make you hate it if you hear it too much on the radio or on TikTok, which is, from what I've seen, it's exactly what happened. So okay, I had a lot more to say about these than I thought I would. Might wind up similar for the list ahead, so let's get things started with number 10. So I rarely bring up chart performance in my year-end lists because it doesn't really matter long term. It's gonna wind up forgotten except by chart nerds like me, especially if the song isn't interesting. But the fact that this song is as tepid and utterly misconceived as this is, especially in a year with so much #1 turnover for asinine reasons, yeah, we gotta talk about this one.
Change being stuck with you, stuck with you, stuck with you. I'm stuck with you, stuck with you, stuck with you.
Because this is not really a song. It's an emblem of monstrous privilege amidst a world-ruining pandemic that on some level isn't even about the ongoing feud between Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber, and the SoundCloud waifu who missed this list altogether, Tekashi 6ix9ine. To understand this, you have to realize that the #1 is often built into record contracts for incentives tied to specifically some pop acts who want to play that game, which seems to be the largest factor to why 6ix9ine and Nicki Minaj have been chasing it for so long. As did Justin Bieber, even earlier this year as Roddy Ricch was doing the Lord's work in keeping him off of it. But since there is some warped power games going on between Scooter Braun, Ariana and Bieber's label boss, and Lucian Grange, the power behind 6ix9ine as of currently, we've got a thrown together charity record that somehow winds up in worse taste than the sneering troll of a convicted sex offender. I'll admit that I'm a little bit surprised that so many folks are throwing this onto worst of 2020 list, because in terms of composition and performance, even for the cardboard pop soul that this is made of, Ariana Grande can save a lot on performance, even if once again Bieber is hopelessly outclassed. But class really is the word of the day here. In 2020, it looks pretty damn reprehensible for two ridiculously rich performers who moved into full-on flex mode in recent years do a cute-ski, old-school, oh I'm stuck inside with you song, when that surely doesn't exist for everyone who is delivering them everything. It's awful and detached in a way that can't even match the production or do anything interesting. And while I think that a time and a vaccine will push this in more into forgotten than roundly despised, it's still pretty damn gross for the moment. I get escapism, but when it feels this detached and phony, a proxy for industry power games, you ain't escaping shit. #9. Okay, look, you should all just be thankful this was the only one of their new singles that caught traction. It could have been worse.
Baby, tonight's like fuego. We bout to spin a dinero. We party to the extremo, 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 extremo.
Ritmo.
There's a lot of ugly things I can say about Ritmo, but I think what stands out the most is how none of it surprises me. We know the Black Eyed Peas would take a great sample and run it through the meat grinder with some of the most obviously canned and synthetic reggaeton percussion you will ever hear. We know that their content would be beyond stupid, generic party sloganeering that makes your brain leak out your ears. I even knew of some of the flagrant corporate ties going into this, where I'm following every will.i.am brand integration PowerPoint presentation, because that is a thing, he'd be tying this into a soundtrack for a movie, this time Bad Boys for Life, which is also the revival of a franchise that nobody goddamn needed. But this is worse. It feels like cultural vandalism, where you just know the Black Eyed Peas didn't go into reggaeton because they wanted to experiment with the sound or the unique stylism which exploded in 2020. They wanted to cash in on the international market, which is why they use Spanish as garnish to their bad writing in ways that don't even pretend to make sense, especially when it comes to that second verse. I honestly kind of felt bad for J Balvin, but he was one of a few too many to co-sign this, and I'll at least say it's nowhere near as bad as some of the worst moments of their album Translation this year, because that thing was a disaster. It feels like an ugly caricature that doesn't even pretend to understand or care about the culture it's nakedly strip mining. And the best thing I can say about this is that beggar reggaeton from acts like Bad Bunny achieved way more penetration culturally than this undercooked knockoff. We didn't need the Black Eyed Peas to come back. Next, #8. The placement of this song on this list kind of reminds me of how my opinion changed around Robbery last year, where it fell back on my list because I got what it was trying to do. That said, just because I get it, doesn't mean I have to like it.
Fuck you and you and you. I hate your friends and they hate me too. I'm through, I'm through, I'm through. This that hot girl bummer anthem, turn it up and throw attention.
So there there are a few compliments I can give this song. It is one hell of a hook, and in comparison with ROXANNE, it paints one hell of a unique picture. A picture that's stained with machismo, debauchery, and contemptuous nihilism directed at everything and everyone, but you know what, if that is your bag, I get why people got into this. And I even understand how blackbear's relative blankness as a performer can work to this song's advantage. It appeals to the lowest common denominator on a cut like this. Almost anyone can slot themselves into the glittering parties where seemingly nobody is having any fun. It's a song that feeds on a lot of negative impulses there. But there's a part of me that just also so much of this is a cheap justification for rampaging shittiness. That blackbear isn't so much artfully blank, but one of the least charismatic and expressive pop acts opposite Justin Bieber. That even if the song is cathartic in its shittiness, it doesn't escape the fact that this is the second act on this list to appropriate Megan Thee Stallion's popularity to treat the fairer sex with abuse and contempt. blackbear has also claimed the song is obviously satire, which kind of puts to shame everyone who's excusing it without irony. But if that's also the case, it's really bad satire, because it's not making any targeted point beyond, well, everyone is stupid and sucks in their 20s. What else is new? And it also doesn't excuse the fact that blackbear has been making records like this completely straight for years now. And again, this wasn't his biggest hit because people got the satire. They rarely do. It's because where there's a horde of white kids who want to make this their anthem, it feels kind of gross on a level that's hard to quantify. At least EXO Tour Life had the whole stare into the abyss feel for its darkest moments, whereas this doesn't have anywhere close to the stomach to go there beyond condom jokes, drug references, throwing up in luxury bags, and broken emo chicks. All from a performer who cannot sell it all that well. Again, I have heard every excuse made for this song, and while some of those might save this from a higher spot on the list, because again, I get it, it's still making the list. Let's move on before I throw up two. Number 7. So look, I get that by me placing so many songs that are openly toxic on this list, you might think that the moralism angle is back in my criticism, and that's not really quite true. It's always an issue of execution. That's why some artists can revel in the debauchery, and it doesn't bother me all that much. Stay tuned for my best list in a couple days to find out why. But sometimes, you don't even get the debauchery. You just get this.
She's the one by the end of the night. I hope you never ever felt more free. Tell your friends that you're so happy.
There's a part of me that really wants to throw Gabby Barrett's ugly political side into this conversation because it's cheap and it's easy, and it even makes sense given how mercenary Charlie Puth will be to work with anyone. But all I will say is that for a demo that has built their politics on bitterness and resentment, and I don't care how this reflects on me, it's more about screwing them, it does kind of make a certain amount of sense that this is the sort of music that Gabby Barrett is making and that there's an audience for it. Now granted, I honestly don't even need to go that deep with this, because on a production level, it sounds awful. Gabby Barrett might worship Carrie Underwood's Before He Cheats, a song I don't even like because it's all built on unfounded suspicions, but was also just anthemic enough to get overplayed at every single karaoke bar for years. But this also has nothing close to that song's punch. The vocal mixing is overprocessed trash, the guitar is gutless, the snap beat has more impact than the actual drums here, and all of it builds up to a song that just feels more small and ugly in its bitterness than containing any sort of righteous power. And you just know that was not the point that Gabby Barrett was trying to make. And with more listens, I can't even say Charlie Puth helps the song. Not only does he sound shrill and unlikable here in his own right, but the complexity he tries to add feels jumbled. It doesn't really match any intended narrative that she might have cheated as well. Although again, hypocrisy would not have surprised me here either. It fits the demo. Again, this got a radio push for some ungodly reason. Likely because it's blandly toxic enough to sit in the background and only really get under your skin if you care, and I just don't think you build a career on that. That's all I'm saying. Number 6. So I mentioned this at the top, in that I've got no idea how certain bad trends or artists will last outside of the parameter of it was 2020. And while I think the increasing number of COVID-19 references were a little excruciating to hear across a lot of new songs, it's an omnipresence in all of our lives, even for the most rich and powerful. I get it. Hell, I'm not even sure how well my criticism will hold up outside of 2020 for these songs, because again, we're living and being shaped by such unprecedented times in this environment, and a song like Stuck With You that feels reprehensible right now might wind up just the most forgettable #1 of both artists' careers in 5 years, just an empty puff of escapism. Ergo, I'm not sure how much of my disgust towards this song is gonna last longer than 2020, but as we can only live in the moment, and I haven't liked this for months now.
But if the world was ending, you'd come over, right? You'd come over and you'd stay the night. Would you love me for the hell of it? All our fears would be irrelevant.
Now look, I get the appeal of this. You're confronted with your mortality, and you look back on an ex for which you're still very much not over, and you wonder that if it was all coming to an end, would you share one final moment together, even despite all that history? And while you can clearly tell this was not written in the time of the pandemic, because a stranger coming over would be the last thing that anyone should want, but maybe that could only add to the sentiment, because it is longing for something that couldn't really happen in today's modern age. And it's not their fault that it got big as a sign of the times, and most people don't pay attention to the lyrics anyway. But even acknowledging all that, this is treacly weak and feels faintly manipulative all the way through. Part of this is not helped by Julia Michaels once again playing submissive and self-flagellating the way she has her entire career as a songwriter and performer, but I think JP Saxe is the bigger problem here. As a singer, he is a willowy husk that screams blandness, and it creeps into his writing style too, adding all the details that you didn't even feel the earthquake that set any of this off because you were distracted in traffic makes it feel less desperate and more just a casual thought experiment as an excuse to find a way to call your ex and get him back. And that's before you think with, wait, if she's not down for forever, why would she want to spend her last minutes before the world ends with you? It would still be forever in that case, just much shorter. If anything, it reminds me way more of Closer by the Chainsmokers and Halsey, where the passage of time plays so much into their reconciliation for all the wrong reasons. In both cases, it feels like the girl's agency is pitched out the window for literally no reason. That's literally referenced multiple times in the hook. It's a Hail Mary that JP Saxe can't even justify. And at least Closer tried to cultivate some tension between the partners here. But you want to know what really set me off with this? This was produced by Phineas, who you might recognize as Billie Eilish's brother and main producer. So on the one hand, you now know why Julia Michaels actually sounds competent for once, but on the other hand, wow, this sounds like a really bad Billie Eilish song stripped of any sort of atmosphere, punch, or performer who could sell any of it. So you know what? On top of being crap, it's also boring as hell, derivative, and reminds me of the worst sort of adult contemporary. It only got a smidge of pathos because of unprecedented circumstances, and unlike Stuck With You, I can see this song's reputation only getting worse. Let's just watch it and see what happens. Number 5. Ugh. Look, at this point, it almost feels like I'm punching
You go
down.
crazy.
But mama a party girl, she just wanna have fun too. They say you ain't wifey type, but I don't care, I want you. She like to do drugs too, she in love with guns too. They say you too piped up, but I think that I love you.
Because let's be real, TikTok might have built a couple of superstars, but it's also built more than its fair share of quick disposable memes and artists who get a flicker of traction before fading out in record time, usually by getting signed to a label, usually Columbia, just fast enough to lose all their royalties along the way. And in that case, it's hard for me to really hate this because he got involved with XXXTentacion's former manager, got a deal, and then promptly no success afterwards, with his debut EP not moving any type of needle. The kid's 19. Odds are pretty bad he's gonna get another hit in this lane. I've seen this cycle countless times before. That said, this is the definition of a bad song that's built for TikTok. A single verse, a piano line, a badly bass-boosted trap beat, and StaySolidRocky barely able to hold a melody amidst all the auto-tune. He sounds faded and incoherent as the girl who wants to party hard with the guns and the drugs, probably more than he does. Hell, that's the power dynamic of this song. It's not as obvious of a simp anthem as ROXANNE was, but it's considerably worse constructed. There's nothing glamorous or appealing or sexy about this scene. Just a girl cheating with him because she's mildly interested in his lifestyle, and then she treats him like shit when he catches feelings, and don't dare judge her for any of this. I don't know, from the story StaySolidRocky is presenting, I have opinions about this girl, but he looks just as worse for wear, stumbling over his bars, projecting nothing interesting about himself either. Really, just feels like the sort of amateurish trap song I get sent every other day by upstart rappers who are trying to quickly catch a trend off the one quick single, and like StaySolidRocky, they're not built for the prime time. The reason he's this high on this list is because the production is terrible, and even in the context of the meme, it's not likable, but I just feel bad for this kid. Good luck catching the second, or you know what, you could just move on. That helps too. Number 4. But you know, if there's a kid I adamantly do not feel bad for in any capacity...
Picture perfect, you don't need no filter. Gorgeous, make them drop dead, you a killer. Shower you with all my attention. Yeah, these are my only intentions.
This is a song I knew would be a single because of the Quavo cash-in verse, but I still have no idea why Justin Bieber picked this of all songs to attach it to. It's literally an insert verse. Why add it to one of the most inexplicable songs of your career? Again, my primary emotion toward this song isn't anger, it's confusion, because Justin Bieber is trying so damn hard to project traditional masculinity in an appealing modern way, and he fumbles it so hard, it would be mesmerizing if the song wasn't complete ass. A huge problem is that Justin Bieber is such a limited presence that when he tries to project sounding love-struck, he sounds prepubescent. And he sounds so wildly out of touch with trying to connect his references that it almost feels like a Hey Soul Sister situation where he doesn't understand how asinine any of this sounds. It's him shouting out her parents for raising her, where he then tries to call her a triple threat by being a boss, bae, and beast in the streets. It's him using the line, stay in the kitchen cooking up, got your own bread, heart full of equity, you're an asset. A song all about trying to empower her. He references traditional patriarchal gender roles and then refers to her as a financial instrument. He literally references to her as a brand in the second verse that she doesn't need the sponsorship, and if she doesn't feel like it for herself, he tells her to act like you know that you are. This feels like this song was written like a cross between an 80s Wall Street meathead and the worst sort of IG girl boss influencer you've ever met. It's fucking uncanny, even before you add Quavo saying that these girls don't even want independence. His verse thankfully stabilizes into something a little bit more grounded for Sweetie, and the way that she's going, she could well send him back to the streets if he tries the same shit Bieber is. But the weird thing is that the song doesn't even sound opulent or intimate either. The production is fizzy and spurting and dominated by the 808s, all shrink-wrapped and sterile. If anything, it feels like Justin Bieber is trying to make Trap Queen, but 5 years too late, and we're nowhere near the punch or personality of Fetty Wap. Oh, you know what? Let's get rid of Justin Bieber. Bring back Fetty Wap for 2021. I think all of us would be on board with that instead of, you know, this. Number 3. I feel like in 2020, if you're making a year-end list and you're just ignoring country because it's just not your genre, or I don't have to care, I feel like you're missing the full picture. Now, granted, I'd argue that's been true for years, but given that Nashville caught up to streaming in a big way, and the genre is building the next wave of real stars and finding mainstream traction with them, there was a lot more country on the year-end Hot 100 and the list for 2020. And while that'll be mostly reflected on my list of the best of the year, as per usual, I'd be remiss to ignore the worst of the genre, like from an act that rode that last wave to success and just will not go away.
When I got what I got, I don't miss what I had. The old me before you belongs to the past.
Jason Aldean is such an anomaly in mainstream country in 2020 that I'm always surprised he doesn't get more scrutiny for it. He was the flagship artist of the indie label Broken Bow, now BBR, which until it was acquired by BMG and ergo Sony, it was a label that was built on him. In Nashville, for such an artist like him to build a following, it's legit impressive from an indie point of view, until you actually listen to the music and and realize he's just the goddamn worst. To put it bluntly, Jason Aldean has been at the forefront of inelegantly mashing in bad R&B and hip-hop tropes with his sound since the remix of Dirt Road Anthem in 2011, and yet since he doesn't tend to get a lot of positive recognition because his music is miserably macho in the worst way possible, and his production sounds like stale, mainstream rock radio dishwater, he reached the point of being so thoroughly unlikable both in and out of his music, I don't even need to reference his politics or the blackface incident, because none of it's surprising. But I will say I was shocked by how much this song legit pissed me off, because this is one of his worst singles in a while. Because, hey, do you want to hear that guy make a moody anthem to his own complacency opposite a cheap fizzy drum machine and guitar and pedal steel interplay that's got no direction? And somehow it actually gets worse from there. This song is reportedly his wife's favorite on his album, but it sure as hell doesn't paint their relationship all that well, where she's asking whether or not he misses the single life or is searching for any sort of deeper fulfillment, and his answer is no. And you sound a little bit crazy talking like that to me, girl. Just kiss me. He's got what he's got, so don't think about his old self, who really was just as miserable. I heard those songs. I've got no reason to trust him. But again, two more problems here. First, drama non-existent. It's him telling his wife to shut up as he's happy, but he's selling none of it. He sounds as miserable as the song does, leading to any sort of complacency feel real sour and ugly, completely ignoring that she might be asking him some of those questions for her benefit too. Now, the obvious way to make this work is just upbeat blandness, but Jason Aldean can't get away from all this macho posturing, even with his wife, so none of this feels fun or likable, and yet since it's one of his biggest hits to date, we aren't getting rid of his outdated ass anytime soon. Congratulations, America. Fun stuff. Number 2. I knew from the second I heard my last two songs, they'd be the worst hits of 2020. It's not close. I could point to them in a second and say, yeah, these are the reasons I'm making this list at all. And in this case, I want you to step into the mind of someone who might be a little bit older, or you might have a taste for classic country. So you put on the radio, you hear a very distinctive, old-fashioned twang, and you might recognize it as There Stands the Glass, a 1953 song by Webb Pierce. And you might think, okay, why is this here? This is Nashville radio. It sounds weird, but I don't dislike it. It's an old barroom song about drinking away your pain. And then something shifts.
I saw your sister at work, I saw your mama at church, I'm pretty sure I saw your car at the mall. I see your face in the clouds, I smell your perfume in crowds, I swear your number's on my phone wants to call.
Yeah, you think I'm making this up? Cody Jinks basically described the same gut-churning feeling I had when I first heard Hard to Forget. He was in a dentist's office, and to quote him from Facebook, I heard the biggest piece of shit I had heard in a long time. I didn't know who it was, but I was pissed. So much in the fact that my blood pressure went up and the dental staff had to wait until it went down to start on me. Unfortunately, I'm not so lucky. I know exactly who Sam Hunt is. To the misfortune of everyone, he has a distinctive voice and writing presence even in bro country, and Hard to Forget and its bastardization of trap and country was not at all surprising, even if it did make me want to retch at the sheer unbridled wrongness of it all. Again, this is about execution. We've seen proof that trap and country can work together, but Sam Hunt does it in the most sterile, white bread, gutless way possible. I'm not even against sampling, but do it in a way where the sample is flattering to the composition, not mutilated so every point of it is missed. Now, granted, Sam Hunt framed this song as the key to his album. Ergo, if you want mugging jackassery, where the girl has very plainly moved on, but Sam Hunt thinks that she's just playing Hard to Forget because a girl showed up at the exact same bar looking hot, and she hasn't picked up her stuff yet, I don't know. Maybe it's because you're gonna harass her the second she shows up on your property. But the weird thing, the song isn't even all that bitter or dark in comparison with most of the album, or even all that miserable. It's got this weird self-obsessed drive for a big anthemic chorus where he seems insufferably convinced that this girl is gonna come back for him because she monopolizes everything that he's currently thinking about. And if this was actually played into the sad sack loser element that makes There Stand the Glass so populist and timeless, that might have even worked. Except Sam Hunt has neither that complexity nor emotional range, and all across his atrocious album Southside, he displays exactly the same sort of lazy presumptuousness. And what's all the more galling is that MCA Nashville and the radio industry, they gave Sam Hunt the easy out, as I predicted. He got himself a hit single, he got praised by a bunch of coastal media types who wouldn't know good trap or good country if it pistol whipped them and stole their girlfriend, and Sam Hunt, once again, got a shot of life into his career, which should have been dead in the water, or rotting in a field after Sturgill Simpson runs him over with a tractor. Call that some cutting grass. In my Southside review, I went off really at length about the systemic laziness and rot that has enabled Sam Hunt in his career, but also keep in mind that despite all this is what he chose to make as his newest single in 2020. To quote Cody Jinks again, "For the love of God, please stop incorporating classic country samples into shit songs. It's not paying homage, it's a slap in the face." Sums it right up, really? Trash. And finally, number 1. Okay, this is actually going to demand some explanation, because while it might be a predictable choice for me, for it to top my list above Sam Hunt does require I explain why, especially given that I fully expect there to be a lot more songs like this coming in the near future, and I might wind up repeating myself with my logic here. And I think some of it is, again, demographics. I referenced this early on, but material was designed to appeal to millennials is filtering away to be replaced by the increasingly thick cushion of memeable irony that Gen Z lives and breeds. And that can be very hit and miss for me. And I know that because Gen X relied on a lot of the same excuses in the 90s and 2000s to excuse the same approach. So I'm fully aware, might be a generational thing, I get it. At the same time, this song nauseates me to my very core, and let's explain why.
Hey, feeling good, like I should. When in dark, walk around the neighborhood.
I mean, I could go with the most obvious point here. It sounds like ass. The piano erupting off the squonking rollick of the guitars, the underweight groove, the trap elements, the gang vocals that sound goddamn gentrified, and our two frontmen who sing like they're pinching their nose with the sort of mocking obnoxiousness that at least 303 and Kesha had the good sense to pair with some righteous energy, plus some truly hideous autotune along the way. It literally sounds like they're mocking the audience with the verse melodies, which is the worst possible contrast to a hook where they sing, "Feeling good, like I should." It sounds like the worst elements of a Sublime song, just with trap elements and even more complacency. Now, this will be where you get people saying, no, it's trying to be aspirational, help people feel better in trying times, live through the struggles like they describe on that verse. But that's not really what this is. These are two guys who can say whatever because there's no way around it, and it will bounce off them with a painfully juvenile rhyme structure that gives us such lines as, "Keep good things inside your ears just like the waves in sound did." None of this feels earnest or warm or affirming, and my god, the desaturated music video does not help matters. It just feels privileged and snide, where they'll be bouncy and happy walking around the neighborhood looking their best, but you know that's not on the docket for you anytime soon. There's a lockdown, keep that in mind. Yeah, I can't get away with that here because this song was actually first released in January of 2019, and it only blew up in February 2020 on TikTok, but it's got the feel of bad e-boy TikTok, so massively self-assured and preening that the flex might only be implied, but it's there. This ties into what I mentioned in terms of gentrification, and you want proof that trap is overexposed to the point of losing all luster? It's this. It feels like the ugly Kids Bop version of itself, especially with those gang vocals. But more importantly, it tells advertising executives that this sort of trap music, it's now safe for the radio and commercials. So guess how often I wound up hearing this as a result outside of the normal avenues. Now, admittedly, if you only knew it from TikTok, you're embracing this with some veneer of irony. It's obviously phony to some extent, even if the mugging duo performing it don't get that. But the phoniness itself doesn't even translate. If it's phony on extending support, congratulations on finding a new way to be utterly hateable. But if it's phony in and of itself, it's the cheapest possible deflection, especially when I've seen more than a few folks crap on millennial self-assuredness and empowerment anthems. At least the majority of those tried, felt more earnest than this, which it feels half-assed all the way down. I'll take Katy Perry or Jessie J trying to be earnest than this mugging jackassery. But that's the true ugliness, isn't isn't it? Folks might crap on Imagine Dragons and the slew of commercial core or grocery core indie acts who get co-opted by marketing teams, but this is a song that thinks it can get around all of that with a cheeky whatever, and it will deflect, even though the content is just so sterile it could fit for any product, perhaps even more so. It's a sort of winking, gentrified deflection that was gross in the alternative scene in the 2000s, and since the last generation gave up trying to fix any of that, we got the natural descendant, but worse. It's disgusting on every conceivable angle, held beyond any sort of vestige of principles. The song just makes me feel really queasy in the pit of my gut when I hear it. And what's worse, I can hear a whole slew of mediocre acts looking to cash in with this exact same formula. And as such, it's the worst hit song of 2020. Barely even deserves to be called a hit if we consider that having any meaning. But if we're not careful, this might be the next big trend of the 2020 if the money's flowing. Way more plausible than you'll want to admit. Just warning you now. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Kind of ends on a sour note, a little bit of a downbeat note, but hey, it's 2020, it's applicable, it's apropos. But hey, beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. So if you want to see some of my future lists, please subscribe. And hey, if you guys actually want to potentially get involved in my schedule coming up for the new year, or help support the channel, link to my Patreon is over there, where, again, you guys get involved in my schedule and access to my private Discord, where we do have some fun over there. Keep in mind, there's the option, link over there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, see you for the next list, and I'll see you next time.